Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
Well, hello and welcome to the MuseCast. You guys, look who's here today. I'm Shawna and that's Dan Kemp, but Osheta Moore is back with us. We are so excited. Thank you for joining us, Osheta. Thank you for rallying to bring us your sermon this past weekend. And look,
what a trooper!
Here. I know.
What a trooper!
Yes, and then here today. So, first of all, welcome back. Welcome. And we're so glad that you're here today.
I'm glad to be here. I've missed you guys. So
yeah, our little MuseCast crew. I want to ask you guys, because it is Thanksgiving week here in the U.S., do you guys have anything exciting that you're looking forward to? Are you going anywhere? Or people coming your way? Or because it's different this year than it was last year. People were able to venture out a little more. So are you guys excited about anything coming up later on this week?
Well, we have some good friends from LA who moved to Spokane after we moved here. And they're like our kids' godparents. They're really, really close to us. And so they're coming in and spending Thanksgiving with us. And my background is our families, neither mine or my husband's families did a whole lot for Thanksgiving or hosting. So this is my first time hosting family in the 20 years we've been together. So
wow.
I'm really excited and a little anxious.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. You are so intentional about the way in which you welcome people and bring them into your fold. So I just know it's going to be amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about you, Dan?
We're Milwaukee bound, and we're gonna go. Probably play with some of Barbara's nieces and nephews, and play some games, and eat some food, and hang out in Wisconsin. So that's where we're going. So
does the dog go with you when you go?
The dog goes with, and she's probably looking forward to it. Barbara and I are at that age where it's like, if there's a party or something, it's like, I don't want to go. I just want to sit and work on my rug, or I work on my haikus, and then once we actually get there, then we have a great time, and we're like, so glad we went. But whereas Ellie, our dog, she's ready for action. She wants the party now. So.
She's looking forward to it.
Yeah.
That's
How about
fantastic.
you? Are you going anywhere?
I'm not going anywhere, and I'm fine with that. However, I am going tomorrow to pick up my son who's at school. So I get to make a pretty drive up north and get my boy.
We're going to Duluth on Friday. We're taking our family up there for a day trip to do the candlelight tour in Glenstream.
Yeah.
Duluth is my favorite place, so I'm so glad you have a kiddo.
I know. He's there, and I have been up there quite a bit just for because he's been in a show or going for family weekend, or he had a choir thing. So that's the beauty of your kid going away only within 2 hours. You get to go back and forth a lot. So I'm excited. We'll go pick him up. And then we're going to go up. After we pick him up, we're going to go up a little bit to Two Harbors, because there's a pizza place there that I was told about, North Shore Pizza Cafe. Shout out. We're going to grab some pizzas. And then we'll come back home, and then we'll do Thursday. And then, when we take him back up on Sunday, we'll do Bentleyville, which I love, the little light thing. But you guys, okay, I said I wasn't going to talk about food, but I have to tell you this one thing I'm super excited about. For the 15 total years that we have lived in Minnesota, have missed deeply and with great sorrow fried okra, really good fried okra. And I was just I really feel like I want that for Thanksgiving. And they opened a Cracker Barrel, not too long ago up here, a Cracker Barrel, and they have fried okra. So I placed an order for 4 servings. And I'm going to pick it up Thanksgiving morning. I'm so excited.
I did that too, because I had the flu. So I was like, I'm not cooking. So I ordered most of our Thanksgiving from Red Cow, and then I'm picking up collard greens and mac and cheese from a Black-owned spot because you got it. So I'm good. You're so wise, Shawna.
Yep. I was like, I'm excited.
And
But that's
Dan,
not
you're
why
not
we're
doing any
here today.
cooking. You're going to do mostly eating.
I'm just gonna. No,
Yeah,
he's fasting,
right.
right? Didn't you say you were just going to totally
No.
fast that
Yeah,
time?
right. Yeah. After Thanksgiving, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Afterwards, got it. We are actually here today because Osheta carried us further into our Getting Real sermon series, talking about the spiritual practices and spiritual disciplines. And Osheta gifted us with a lesson and a teaching on holy listening and just silence. And so I'm excited to have her here today. We're going to talk with our words about silence.
That's right.
But before we dive in, we're going to get our world famous, ever in demand summary from Dan Kent.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was really hoping, part of me, the rebellious kind of oppositional part of me, the 17-year-old Dan in me, was hoping you would come out and introduce yourself and then not say anything after that for 40 minutes and just stand there quietly and let us figure it out. That would have been so punk rock. But I think the way you did it was probably better.
Yes.
But yeah, I love this. What I like about this series and these sermons is that these are things that I'm not the type of person who I'm going to go buy a book on any of these topics and like really do a study on it. And so when it's part of the series and I sort of accidentally consume it, I'm better off for it. And this is definitely one of those things where I feel like this has been really important for me. But Osheta talked about a spiritual practice of silence and listening to God. She kind of talked about why we do this and how we do this. And she talked about some of the obstacles that can get between us and doing this effectively, like, for instance, perfectionism or making it just another thing that we strive to perform at, and which I thought was extremely insightful. And then you kind of use this as a throughput to your message. You use this idea that from Thomas Merton that every time you fail at this, it's just an opportunity to come back to God. And that was so helpful. And then you kind of went into a little bit depth about what is the beauty of this spiritual practice and spiritual practices in general, really. And you talked about how these practices strengthen our soul. They make us spiritually resilient. They ground us. And in the long run, I think they facilitate our wholeness. You did this quote from the Message on Matthew 11:28-30, where you talked about the unforced rhythms of grace is the clause that you grabbed there, which was really beautiful. And you pointed out how that kind of captures the intention that we have to be part of this rhythm, but there's also like, it's not forced. It's just this rhythm that kind of engulfs us. And you said a few other things, but one thing I really appreciated is you really focused on this idea of Jesus is not going to put something on you that's ill-fitting. And if the disciplines feel ill-fitting, well, maybe that's because you're doing it the way somebody else is doing it. Maybe you need to think about how you should do it with your own personality and your own lifestyle. And then finally, you said that should not be, silence and stuff should not be considered a way of celebrating or sanctifying loneliness, but rather it's a discipline of holy listening. And it's a way that we can sort of make ourselves more sensitive to God's Spirit when he speaks to us. And we can do this in solitude, or we can do this in community. We can do this, we can go on a retreat and do this, or we can make it part of our daily rhythm. And then if you do it in community, you could do it in like your big community, or you can have like a spiritual director. And so it was a great sermon in that there's some profundity there, but there's a lot of practical stuff there as well. And it's one of those things where there is the intellectual part of it, which kind of it tickles that part of a person's mind and spirit. But then through the practice, there's also this treasure that can come from it. And I thought it was really well done. And I feel like I'm missing something important, but it'll probably come up in our discussion. So great job. And we were all blessed for it. So thanks, Osheta.
Amen. Amen. I really appreciated the grace and the tone of your entire sermon. And what I mean by that is just saying up front, and I feel like it's been something we've kind of tried to communicate throughout the series, but like, this is not meant to be an oppressive thing. Like, this is a way in which we can quiet all the distractions, the noise, the important things, the anxious things. It's a way in which we can shove that out of our space and enter into a space where we're connecting heart to heart, face to face with Jesus. And so I think that is so special, because there are a lot of people, and Dan and I have talked about this, who they hear spiritual disciplines and it just is like this thing, this strenuous thing, this thing that you have to do, and you have to do it a certain way. And I love the grace with which you opened your sermon with, just to say, hey, this is not meant to be something that is a have to, or not something that God is like waiting to see if you get it right. And the fact that you did bring in the fact that we are wired differently, we have different personalities, so we're going to engage differently. I think that's so important and so freeing for people to recognize and realize that. I remember when I first met my husband, he's more contemplative and reflective, and he journals a lot. And I'm more verbose and verbal, and I'm more energetic. And so in a worship setting, we are very different. And I remember first noticing his worship was more like, he would even sit down sometimes, he'd pray, and I'm just like, does this man love Jesus? Because I'm like, very active and the beauty is he's wired differently than I am, and we both connect and engage to God in a variety of ways, and that's okay. And so I know that wasn't the whole of your sermon, but I just love the way that you set the table that way, just to let people know that you can be who you are, and you can engage, and you can walk these things out. You can live in this space of connection with God, uniquely you, however you're created. So I really appreciated that. I thought that was really neat. As we always do, we want to give you, the speaker, an opportunity to share more, or to unpack something that you said but didn't get to, dive as deeply into, or something, maybe a new thought that's come to you since you shared with us through your flu-ridden body over the weekend.
So yeah, yeah, thanks, Shawna. So I think, one of the things that I appreciate about the practice of silence is that it's not something that we have to go to, or that it's not something that we don't really need a whole lot to practice silence. Like with journaling, I need my journal, and I need my Bible, and I need my pen, or there, like, some of these practices, you kind of need certain things, or you feel like you have to be in a certain place to be able to participate, like taking communion. But with silence, it really is one of those practices that once we are aware of it, like once we recognize the importance of it, we can integrate it in small and meaningful ways throughout our life. It's that as you're going kind of aspect of our discipleship. So like, as I was thinking about the sermon, I was thinking about how did silence become one of the important practices for me. And it really started super early in my relationship with my husband, because we met and we were long distance at the very beginning of our relationship. And so we would have phone calls, like long phone calls, and almost every night. And, this is back in the like sort of I kiss dating goodbye like phase of my discipleship, where I was the same sort of way, Sean. I was like, do you really love Jesus? And I had all these criteria, litmus tests for whether or not my husband loves Jesus. And one of them was, would he pray with me on the phone? And so we would pray on the phone with each other, but I would jump right in. I would be like God, and I would just like jump into prayer. But my husband would just sit quietly when it was his turn to pray. He would just sit quietly, and it just unnerved me until like I asked him like why he does that. And he was like, for me, prayer is a centering practice where I am paying attention to God. And so that quiet is me like getting out of my one sort of headspace into this space where I'm paying attention to my soul and to God, and I'm listening. And that was the very first time that I thought, oh, like prayer, like part of my prayer life should include silence. And I think for a lot of us raised in evangelical settings, we're not really taught to include silence in our prayer time. That's adoration, it's praise, it's thanksgiving, it's, petitions, like all those sort of things. And that's all of us bringing something to God. But I think we're uncomfortable with that silence. And so I have learned to, when I was introduced to the concept of silence, the practice of silence, it was introduced to me in like taking a silent retreat, like in a monastery or whatever. And I'm like, I can't do that, but I can sit quietly for 10 seconds before I pray for someone. Or I can, like, a few weeks ago, my husband and I had a ton of meetings. It was a very talky day about good things, but and we came in and he wanted to kind of debrief about some of the things we had talked about. And I was like, you know what? I've just had a lot of words and been around a lot. I need to go away and walk in silence for a while. I need to just process this with God first. And that is the practice of silence. One of there's a Benedictine thinker, Christopher Jameson of Worth Abbey. He says, silence is a gateway to the soul, and the soul is the gateway to God. So when we begin integrating intentional silence in our everyday rhythms, even if it's 10 seconds or 10 minutes, it's opening us up it's a gateway to our soul. It's opening us up to discern, how am I wired? What's important to me? What are the things I am feeling heavy about? Where do I feel close to God? It's that space where you can just kind of pay attention. And then that invites God into it. And so I actually have changed the way I talk about prayer. I often say prayer is thinking in front of God because of integrating silence into my prayer, into my spiritual disciplines. But I think if we don't pay attention, if we don't have those spaces where we can say, kind of like how you, Shawna, are like, I'm an external processor, I'm verbose, like I need sound. So you might practice silence with like the ambient music, like I offered, or like doing the dishes that have the tinkling in the background, but you're like paying attention to your soul as you're doing that, as opposed to somebody who might be more like your husband, where Scott might be more like, I need to go away and walk quietly and not talk to anybody, and maybe even put in noise canceling headphones just so I can like block out the noise. Some people need that. But silence is that space where you can pay attention to yourself and how God made you and delight in that.
So good. Thank you for that, Osheta.
I'm probably more of a music guy, like just sit, listen to music and just think of, and journaling and stuff like that. I definitely process better when I'm writing, with handwriting. So just sitting quietly. I don't know if I could do that, but
I love that you are saying, and you said this weekend as well, that what this is doing is it's creating space, like pockets of moments. Like you did show the quiet room, which my heart started beating really fast. And I thought, I could never, it's just not my jam. But for those who can, that's beautiful. But what I appreciate is that you talking about all the variety of ways in which we can just create a silent space. And in that space, it's not necessarily dead silence. It's just like quieting some of the noise so that we can really hear what's going on within us, and that we can connect better. And like you just said, even if it's 10 seconds before you start to pray, or all the different ways, like you said. But I think it's really important to recognize that God loves us all uniquely, and we are created so uniquely. And so he can connect with us in those unique ways. And so I hope people are encouraged by that.
I hope so too. And, like with all of the practices, it's important to start slow, but it's kind of like when you give up, when you kind of moderate, or you take sugar in moderation, and you're kind of like, what, I've been eating a lot of sugar, so I'm just going to scale down, and maybe like the sugar that I eat is like fruit or whatever, and then your body starts to crave like more natural sugars. And then you're like, wow, I've gone through seasons like this where I drink a can of Coke and I'm like, whoa, what, like that did not, like, that's way too much. Like I can't even stand it anymore. And what I have found with silence is actually something very similar, where I integrate it in small ways in my life, and then I start to crave more and more silence. to where like part of my spiritual direction program requires me to go on 2 silent retreats a year. And I'm actually really looking forward to my silent retreat, where when I first was introduced to the idea a year ago, when I was looking at this program, I was like, I could never. But now I'm like, yeah, like gather together, chat for a little bit, and then spend the next, 24 hours in silence. Okay. And so I just think that, we do kind of want to push ourselves. You were saying something about it's a discipline. We do want to push ourselves because we're caring for our soul, and that's a part of us that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. And so it should feel a little bit like uncomfortable. But but I think if that small step in is uncomfortable enough, then that's great. But you might find yourself actually wanting more discomfort down the road, which I think is the life of a disciple.
Amen to that.
I'm curious,
Dan, what
Shawna,
is swirling through your head? Oh,
well,
no, I'm asking you. What are you asking?
Well, because I was just thinking about like I'm so not geared toward this, that when Osheta kind of got to this part of the sermon where we actually did it, I'm like, well, what do I do? It's like, well, no, you don't do anything. That's the point. And like cognitively, I'm like, well, yeah, you don't do anything. But I kept asking myself, well, what do I do? And that's, so that just shows how like my engine's not tuned to this at all. And so, but it was good though. I mean, one of the first word that, like you said, pick a word, and I'm like, I don't want to pick a word, but this word kept coming up, and I'm like, all right. And the word was complete. And I just kept thinking that because I think, and this is just psychoanalyzing this spontaneous moment, but I feel like one of the things that keeps me from doing these types of disciplines is this feeling like I can't do that now because I still have work to do. And just this idea that, no, you don't have work to do. You have a lot of completeness in you, and you can just dwell in that. And so that's how and it was great. So, I mean, it's definitely the type of thing where I don't want to do it. I'm wrestling myself to do this thing. And I can totally see how, boy, this could have some big payoff. So I'm curious, Shawna, given that you're sort of an external processor, how you experience that part of the sermon.
Yeah. So honestly, I had to tell myself, Shawna, just be a child of God in this moment, and not a pastor here at Woodland Hills that has to go check this and check that and check this. And, oh my gosh, how is the temperature in the room, and are the doors okay? All the tasky things that go into part of my role on Sunday. I literally had to tell myself, nope, I guess something could blow up. I'm going to, because I felt it was important. So I sat down, which I don't normally do because I'm walking around doing different things. So I sat down, and I had to it took me a little bit. I was thankful for the music in the background, because that does help me. Because if it's total silence, I get really distracted. Like I pick up on every other sound. So again, it wasn't natural for me. I had to tell myself, you're putting on this hat right now. And then I had to sit down, and then I just had to enter in. And because I love so then it's like, am I doing this wrong? Well, 10,000 opportunities, right? So because I love worship so much, and that is truly a way in which I connect with the Lord. A worship phrase kept coming to mind from an old song by Matt Redman, and it's called "Let My Words Be Few." But the tag is like, I stand in awe of you. I stand in awe of you. So I let my words be few, because I'm so in love with you, Jesus. And so I stand in awe of you just kept rumbling around in my head, which was really, I thought, interesting, because it was a song. It's a song about standing in silence, in awe of him, as we're doing this practice. And that song, you guys, is it's old, but that's just kind of what kept. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So yeah, it was cool. It was cool. I was thankful that I pressed in and turned off, all the things in my brain, and just really leaned into the experience.
Yeah,
That makes me really happy to hear that.
Is that good, Osheta?
No, however, whatever it is what God wanted for that moment. But that just makes me really happy to hear that. And I love that worship song too.
Yeah.
That's a great,
so
those
good.
old songs are the best.
I know. They so are. Okay, so Dan, you said a few times that this isn't like a natural thing for you to lean into or to do. And so when you hear stuff like this, are you challenged at all to like, oh, I want to see like if I can or incorporate this into my life, or I just know you're so busy, man, and you're such a thinker and you're always going and, processing and creating stuff. So how does the series, how is it landing for you? And then this particular practice of silence and retreat, I really loved that aspect of it as well. Like, how do you approach that moving forward?
Well, I think I'm the type of person who, like, if there's something that I am kind of like, I'm not naturally drawn to, a lot of times, in the same way that like a boring topic in the Bible, there's usually the best treasure, a practice that I'm not particularly drawn to probably has the best things for me. And so that's my assumption about this. And so, and really, I've sort of been kind of chipping away at this kind of idea for a long time. And when I started writing haikus, I largely did that because I had this sense that I'm just not enough. I'm not in the moment enough. And haikus force me to be in the moment, which is a type of listening, which is a type of, okay, what's going on here right now? I'm going to just receive what's around me. And I think that's sort of a baby step toward this. And so I absolutely think that this is an important practice, and one that I would like to incorporate more and get better at, because, and being like a thinker and being just my own, just being me, I have a hard time trusting when God is talking to me. Like, I don't really trust that that's actually really God, and I don't really do a lot of work toward like listening for that, because I just, a lot of times I don't know how to verify that that's God and not just me. And so like I have all sorts of doubts around that. And so I haven't really, because of that, I haven't really invested a lot of time in these types of practices. And maybe it's the case that, well, maybe it goes the other way, where if you invest in these types of practices, you discover ways of discerning the Spirit of God more effectively. And so I'm open to that. And that is what intrigues me most about this discipline going forward.
Well, Dan, you just mentioned something that I think is important. And this is what I brought up in the sermon, is oftentimes we question in solitude, was that God? Or, or was that pizza? We don't trust our own. We don't trust our own soul or our own intuition. And that's why the silence and community piece is just as important as the silence and solitude piece. So if you have people around you that as you're processing, they can say, I'm picking up this thread, and you're like, yeah, that's what I'm sensing too. Or I'm sensing this from the Lord. And you're like, you know what, actually, I'm hearing this. And you kind of back and forth process that together. That helps strengthen your ability to discern, is that the Spirit, or is that me, or is that, and so, and then also a spiritual director for me has been incredibly helpful in helping me discern how the voice of God lands for me, whereas as opposed to maybe the voice of the enemy or the voice of my false self or all those sorts of things. So, that's why the community, and I don't think we talk about silence in community as much, because we think of silence and solitude as hand in hand, which they are.
Right.
The silence in community, just like with Eli and Samuel, silence in community is just as important as somebody saying, wait, that's the voice of the Lord. Go back and say, here I am, send me. And you saying, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Like, that is important too.
I loved that story. And there's few things better than when you find the perfect Old Testament story, for the point that you're making. That was a good one. That was a really good one. So. That
was the perfect one. All right, you guys, guess what time it is?
Is it time already?
It's nugget time. And I don't mean food. Wow. I mean, we're going to... bless the MuseCast audience with our final little nugget, the takeaway that we would like for everyone tuning in to have before we go. So, Dan,
all right.
Go first.
Well, here's what I'll say is this just came up on Sunday evening. So after your message, we were watching Columbo, which we do every Sunday. Yes. And it was the scene from like 1976. And Columbo has to go to like a DMV type place. And he gets there and he's like, shoot. And there's this huge line, just this massive line. And they're all just standing there. Nobody has smartphones. They are just standing there, kind of rocking back and forth, just staring off into space, doing nothing. And there was this sense of fear gripped my heart, like, oh my goodness, can you imagine standing in line for an hour without your smartphone? And it just made me realize that the smartphone, it doesn't allow us to be separate from the flow of our lives. And the fact that I was horrified about standing in line for an hour without my smartphone suggests to me that, maybe you need to do more of these isolative kind of quiet practices, because that should not be something that strikes your heart with fear. And so if people are watching and the idea of standing without your smartphone for an hour, with nothing to occupy your time, maybe this is a type of practice that might be good for you as well.
Wow, that's good. That is so good, Dan. Columbo to the rescue on that one.
That's right.
I will just say that the thing that I feel like has come to me over and again in the last year and a half is margins, like to make sure that I have room margins in my life. And with Osheta's sermon on listening and silence and holy listening and retreats, I again felt like where can I just intentionally create margin in my life so there's space, so that I'm not just bombarded with exterior noise, so that I can tune in to hear. And whether it's small things, which for me, it most likely will be initially as I wade into the waters of this, or something big, just pay attention to that and look for margin in your life, space, so that you can create a bit of opportunity to hear what your soul is saying and needing and feeling, and what the Spirit of God is saying. So that's my nugget. Osheta, you get to close us out with your nugget.
So my last nugget would be, this is supposed to be a practice that delights your soul. Yeah. So if this begins and you're like, and you don't want to do it, bundle it with something that is exciting or that's good for you, that you're like, oh, I only light this candle when I practice silence. I only go to this coffee shop and get a coffee and walk around the block when I practice silence. For me, I started this 10, 12 years ago, silence. I would go to an apple orchard and walk around. And that was the only time of my week that I would go to an apple orchard. So, again, your personality matters, your preferences matter, what brings you delight matters. So think of something that you really, really love, and then just reserve it for your time of silence. That can just be, I love this coffee and I'm going to only drink this coffee during my 5 minutes of silence. I love this background cello music. I will only listen to this when I am doing some holy listening. But bundle it with something that brings delight at the very beginning of building this practice, because then as the Spirit starts to move and you start to experience the joy and the delight of paying attention to your soul, then it's it's a tangible light and a spiritual light. And then you're like, yeah, I like practicing silence. So
wow, that's brilliant.
The bundle. We all do the bundle. I love it.
That's brilliant.
Oh, that is so brilliant. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I feel like we need the high five cam, because we need to do the team high five. So we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. All right, let's go. High five.
Woo, high five. All right.
Yay. Way to go, guys. Thank you, Osheta, for powering through and being here. Thank you, audience, for connecting and tuning in. And we invite you to continue to check out the services, and then circle back on Tuesdays where we continue the conversation. Have a great week, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.